Moving on to question number 16. What are the underlying traumas that trigger this behaviour and where did they come from? Now, I appreciate that trauma is a strong word that we usually associate to victims of severe abuse or violence. But we need to redefine what trauma means. Trauma is to be deeply distressed and disturbed, to be shocked by something, someone, or an event. Trauma can take place when someone we love has done something awful, abusive, and unforgivable. When we have an experience of severe illness or even a physical injury can cause trauma. We can even feel traumatized by hearing some shocking news that totally alters the way that we think about something or even changes the way that we begin to live our life. So trauma is more present and happens more often than we think. So with this question, I want you to explore where you have a trauma associated to the archetype, which is resulting in the detrimental impact. So if I was to explore where I have an underlying trauma associated to the chocolate fantasy, I would answer that by saying that I feel trauma whenever I argue with my partner, and this triggers me to eat chocolate after the event. What else? I feel trauma whenever I have to travel by plane, and this triggers my chocolate fantasy. What else? I feel trauma when I watch a violent movie that reminds me of a situation from my past, and this triggers the urge to eat comforting chocolate. What else? I feel trauma each time I go to the gym for a heavy workout, and this triggers my chocolate fantasy, that need for chocolate to soothe the trauma of working out. What else? I experience trauma each time I have to do something I dislike, and that's causing me to be distressed, and this triggers the fantasy of my chocolate habit. Moving on to question number 17. What are the underlying shames that trigger this behaviour and where did they come from? So what is shame? It is that painful feeling of feeling inadequate or unworthy to be or do something. There is a feeling of humiliation and a sense of dishonour that we feel about something or someone. So if I was to answer this question related to the chocolate bar fantasy, it could be that I have wronged someone, and each time that I think of that situation, I feel painfully ashamed by what I've done, and this triggers the need for me to have a soothing bar of chocolate. It could be that I don't have the skills to perform a certain task or duty, and whenever I'm asked to do it, or even just by thinking that I am incapable or useless of doing it, then this elicits a painful feeling that triggers my fantasy to have chocolate to get relief. Now, I'm not sure about you, but all this talk about chocolate is arousing my desire for chocolate. And that's the point of this exploration exercise. Using the example of a chocolate fantasy, we are revealing all of the ways that this particular fantasy comes to fruition. We are becoming more knowledgeable and aware of the urges and triggers and the environmental and situational associations that elicit the fantasy. And with this awareness of the causations and behavioural patterns comes the power of choice. And we'll get into the power of choice a little bit later, but for now, let's stick with the questions. Question number 18, what are the underlying resentments that trigger this behaviour? And where did they come from? So here you are thinking about all of the ways that you hold a grudge, a dislike, an envy, a jealousy, a hatred even towards someone else, towards an aspect of your life, even towards an aspect of you as a person? Where do you have resentments that trigger this archetype's behavior? So, for example, it could be that you keep dwelling over the fact that you can never have this certain experience that you really desire. And because you feel you can't have it, this is making you upset, frustrated, or angry. You could be annoyed that someone has done something wrong to you, or that they keep doing something wrong to you that's causing you heartache, a loss of dignity, or money even, or whatever it is. And because you resent them for it, you harbour these ill feelings towards them over that one thing. Question number 19. What are the underlying guilts that trigger this behaviour, and where did they come from? Here you are exploring where you have done something wrong. You've made a mistake. You've committed an error of judgment. You've knowingly upset someone and you've caused them some type of loss and harm, where you are guilty as charged. Whenever you think of this particular guilt, or whenever you are confronted by a similar situation that makes you feel guilty, then this triggers the traits or the detrimental impact of the archetype. So with this question, identify where you associate guilt to the behaviour of this archetype. Question number 20. Recall a time from your adolescence when you started to indulge with this behaviour. Describe exactly what happened and why you felt it was necessary to behave this way. So think back to your early adolescence, right back to the age of 12 years old, right through to, say, early 20s or even younger, and notice when the behaviour of this archetype was a really prominent part of you and what you did. Think about when and why this part of you started to emerge into your life more frequently, more often, as a strong characteristic trait. What situations and people called forth this part of you? Moving on to question 21. Recall the earliest childhood memory that you can think of to establish the first time this particular behaviour became present within you, and describe the exact circumstances that activated this part. And please note that some of our earliest childhood memories go right back to 2 years old. So that was the first moment, the first experience or event that took place where you first engaged with this type of behaviour. Now this will take you some time to sift through your memory banks as you trace backwards. You might get the memory straight away, and it might take you a whole day or perhaps two to actually track back to that first time you had that experience. Take however long you need to take to trace back to that first time that you experienced the behaviour of the archetype. Now let's go deeper into exploring the patterns and triggers of your archetype. And we're going to begin with question number 22. What are the specific circumstances that trigger this behaviour of yours? So here, I want you to think of the actual situations that are related to your career, relationship, possibly your finances, social activities, any situation where each time something certain happens in this situation, it triggers the behaviour of this archetype, where there is a reoccurring theme, a reoccurring pattern that is emerging. Like, when this happens, I then do this one thing over here, or a multitude of things. And there could be different situations where you are triggered to behave in this manner. Which leads us on to question number 23. What are the exact thoughts that occur just before and at the point of feeling triggered that makes you act this way? So where you think, I will say this, I will do that, I will go there, and I will get this. What are the actual thoughts that arise into your mind right before and during the situational triggers that trigger this behavior. The thoughts that are suggesting and directing you to engage with the behavior of this archetype. So let's move on to question number 24. Describe the specific memory or image that arouses your desire to behave this way. So here, I want you to identify the memory or image that triggers you. It could be a memory or image of something or someone that you desire. It could be an advertising slogan or brand name. So, for example, if we go back to the chocolate fantasy, it's highly likely that we are fantasizing over the image of a chocolate bar, of the memory of the last time that we ate a chocolate bar. So find out what that memory or image is that is arousing your desire and triggers this archetype's actions. And it's important that you do, because memories and images are conditioned within the mind and body and have powerful sensations, powerful emotions attached to them. And it's these sensations and emotions that trigger us into performing an action. We begin to relive the sensations of what we desire whenever we are triggered by a memory or an image. Which brings me to the next question. Question number 25. What bodily sensations, i.e. touching, tasting, smelling, hearing, or seeing, also triggers this behavior? This is pretty simple, right? When triggered to behave like this archetype, you are having a strong sensation where you feel a sensory input, you feel something, you get a taste for something, you get a smell for something, or you can simply hear something or see it. And this specific sensation, this sensory input is so strong that you feel compelled to enact the trait of this archetype. Question number 26. What type of energetic state triggers this behavior? With this question, I want you to establish if you are feeling up or down at the point of feeling triggered. Whether your energy is low and then you're looking for a high, or your energy is high and you're looking for a low. Are you feeling tense and needing to feel relaxed? Or are you relaxed and need to get some tension and excitement in your life? Also, consider if it's when you're feeling hungry, horny, humpy, or haggy. In other words, do you need to eat, have sex? Do you feel angry or irritated? And this energetic state is what triggers the archetype. Question number 27. What has to happen for you to feel like behaving this way, and why? So think of the circumstantial events that actually cause the behavior of this archetype. What are the type of interactions that make you behave this way? What type of expectations do you have that trigger this behavior? What promises do you make to yourself and others which trigger this trait? What are the lifestyle, relational, or situational outcomes that signal it's time for you to take action with the behavior of this archetype? Question number 28. What does not have to happen for you to feel like behaving this way, and why? So here you are establishing all of the things which don't happen, are not happening in your life, that perhaps you wish they would, and because they don't, this triggers the behavior of the archetype. So what type of interactions are not happening that makes you behave this way? What type of expectations do you have which are not met, not fulfilled, and it triggers this behavior? What promises do you fail to follow through with or live up to, and this triggers the archetype? What are the lifestyle, relational, or situational outcomes that do not happen which signal it's time for you to behave like this archetype? Moving on to question number 29. How do you know when it is the right time to behave this way, and why? Now, this might seem like we're asking the same question but in a different way, and in a way, we kind of are. But it is the slight distinctions in the way that we ask a question that will uncover different answers. So here, with this question, you want to describe a certain feeling, sense, or knowingness that you get that makes it the right time for this archetype to behave the way it does. Question number 30. How do you know when it is not the right time to behave this way, and why? So just simply reverse the last question to establish if there is a certain feeling, sense, or knowingness that makes you think now's not the time for this archetype to behave this way. Question number 31. How often do you behave this way? Is it hourly, daily, weekly, weekends, or just on certain occasions? And why? So with this question, I want you to establish how often this archetypal trait is present in your life. You're trying to kind of establish the pattern, the cycle, and it may help you to recall the memory of an entire week to establish this answer. And take all the time that you need to answer this question. Track back over the days of an entire week, maybe 2 weeks or a month. And this will make the following question easier to answer, which is question 32. Is there a daily, weekly, or monthly pattern to this behavior? And if so, how does this pattern unfold from start to finish? With a pattern, we are looking for a correlation between set times, specific behavioral patterns, triggers, and key days that this archetype will activate and fulfill its agenda. With all the questions that you've answered before, this should be easy for you to do. Moving on to question number 33. Does this behavior of this particular archetype trigger the desire of another archetype? And if so, what is the actual process that takes place? So, for example, the escape artist is an archetype that wants to avoid a painful situation, which then triggers the fantasist archetype, which has a desire to get some pleasurable relief from the painful situation. So establish if your archetype triggers the traits of another archetype, or indeed if your archetype is being triggered by another archetype, and find out what the link is. Question number 34. What do you feel are the most significant triggers that activate this behavior, and why? And the most significant triggers are the ones which are intense, frequent, and effective. And to answer this question, you are simply reviewing all of the answers from the previous questions so that you can summarize the most prominent causations of this archetype. So that's it. That's exactly how you explore the archetype with those 34 questions. Now you can process all of the different detrimental impacts of this archetype that you have identified in step 2 by taking them through the self-exploration questions. So if you have identified 2, 3, or 4 different negative traits of one archetype, that is the amount of times that you will take the archetype through the questioning process that you've just been through with me. And yes, this can take some time for you to process it. Once you are done, you will then have a complete picture, the complete self-awareness of how this archetype is influencing your behavior, which then places your hands on the controls of self-control. So process the archetype by answering the questions to the best of your ability. Then, once you have processed the detriments of this one archetype, take a minimum of a few days to a week to observe how the behavioral patterns of this archetype plays out in your daily and weekly life. Become mindful of its traits and reflective on your findings. By doing this, by studying the archetype from a third perspective as you go through a few days and a week, because you become more self-knowledgeable of its triggers, desires, patterns, you will become even more self-aware and come to more realizations about this part of you. And journal your experience, because this information is going to be valuable and necessary for the mind games that you play later. Also, from this questioning process, you should have experienced a psycho decompression, whereby unpacking the underlying issues of each archetype comes with the initial release of negative energy. This would be you decompressing from the repressed energy of this archetype. Decompression is the ultimate escapism and relief, where you will finally unbottle from those years or decades even of blocked and unmetabolized anxiety, which leads us on to step 4 of the self-exploration process, which is to simply process the remaining archetypes that you've already identified and be forewarned. By processing all of the archetypes, you will undergo a major decompartmentalization, which will be like unpacking a flat pack furniture piece, right? At the beginning, it will feel like a bewildering mess, and the enormity and complexity of what you uncover about yourself, it may feel worse to begin with. That's because the conscious aspect, which is I am self-aware, of your mind will at first be struggling to put the contents of everything together. But don't fret and don't feel discouraged. Just follow the instructions that I set forth, and slowly but surely and in time, everything will begin to come together in the finished article of completeness. The process of decompartmentalization will organically activate your mind to start reflecting upon and reorganizing the information that you've brought out from the darkness into the light, where the once fragmented contents of your mind will organically start to reintegrate to a unified whole of self-awareness. Being confused and overwhelmed even is part of that initial process. You can also think of processing the different archetypes as completing the jigsaw of self. When fragmented, the different archetypes represent the incomplete jigsaw. Once processed into your awareness, then they will slowly integrate to form the greater picture of you. And once this stage 1 exercise is completed, you will have no self-doubt as to who you are. You will truly know thyself. You will also begin to naturally question your behavior more often, becoming more mindful about how and why you think and subsequently behave. This puts you in a powerful position as the observer and questioner of your mind. And from that powerful position is where you start to become the controller and driver of your mind, rather than be the passenger. So take however long it takes to complete this stage 1. It could take weeks, a month, or even more. It will take however long it takes until you are completely satisfied that you've explored all the different archetypes that you have identified with. And once you're done, move on to stage 2 of the resolution game, which is where you will learn to identify with a problematic character. And I will see you in that tutorial.